Good morning. I hope your coffee is hot this morning, your tea just right. I hope the trees on your street are sheltering you kindly. And I'm wishing you and the people you love and our neighbors here in the US and around the globe safety and connection today and every day. My name is Grover. Today is Tuesday, November 19th, and this is Grover Reads the News. Would you like to hear the news for today? If so, keep on listening. First, we have more news on the presidential transition. Donald Trump's announcements of who he will tap to lead key areas of the government are raising high levels of criticism and concern. He has tapped former Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard to lead the U.S. intelligence services, drawing criticism and concern from members of both parties because of her seeming support for Putin's war against Ukraine. He has also picked Brendan Carr, the author of the FCC section of Project 2025, to lead the FCC. He will focus on what he calls, quote, big tech censorship and television news he calls, quote, too liberal. And Trump has announced that he will tap far-right Congressman Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General. In this role, Gaetz would be the country's chief law enforcement officer and oversee the legal positions that the government takes on key issues, including abortion, civil rights laws, and First Amendment issues such as protest. Gaetz has a long and worrying record of racism and sexism. Until he resigned from the House shortly after Trump's announcement that he's picking him as Attorney General, he was under investigation by the House Ethics Subcommittee, whose review of behavior included sex trafficking a minor, whether Gaetz engaged in sexual misconduct and illicit drug use, whether Gaetz accepted improper gifts and sought to obstruct government investigations of his conduct, The Guardian reports. In 2018, Gaetz was condemned for inviting a Holocaust denier to Trump's State of the Union address. A year later, he hired a speechwriter who had been fired by the White House after speaking at a conference that attracts white nationalists. As a Florida state lawmaker, he opposed a revenge porn law, reportedly telling the bill's sponsor that ex-lovers could do what they pleased with the images their partners had shared with them. Finally, on Monday, Donald Trump confirmed his campaign promise to start his administration with mass deportation of immigrants. The Guardian reports his administration would declare a national emergency and use the U.S. military to carry out mass deportations of undocumented immigrants. Grecia Martinez Rosas, the executive director of United We Dream Action, a network of groups that advocate for dreamers, said during a post-election debrief that, quote, Trump may be reelected, but he does not have a mandate to come into and rip apart our communities, unquote. There are 62 days until the inauguration on January 20th. Next, we have news on global conflicts involving U.S. weapons trades with Israel. The U.S. Senate is due to vote Wednesday on legislation that would block some arms sales to Israel, backed by lawmakers who say Israel is obstructing aid shipments desperately needed by Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders introduced the measures, known as Joint Resolutions of Disapprovals, or JRDs, in September, and announced on November 13th that he will bring them to the Senate floor for a vote this week. Under U.S. law, the executive branch can authorize weapon sales to foreign countries, but Congress has de facto veto power over the issue. Lawmakers can introduce a measure to block a given sale, a JRD, under the Arms Export Control Act. For the resolution to become a law, it would have to pass the Senate and House of Representatives and be signed by the President. Most of Gaza's population of 2.3 million people has been displaced and are at risk of famine. Gaza health officials say more than 43,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's 13-month-long offensive. The summary was sourced from Reuters and Al Jazeera. Now we have an update on global fights for democracy from Hong Kong and Aotearoa, also known as New Zealand. more than 35,000 people marched to the Parliament in Wellington, New Zealand, or Aotearoa, the Maori Kingdom, to protest a bill that would reinterpret the Treaty of Waitangi, New Zealand's founding document, which currently upholds Indigenous rights. In a joint statement on Thursday, the Labour, Green, and Maori Party opposition parties called on the Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, to block what they called a, quote, divisive bill that was pandering to a dangerous reactionary fringe. If passed, the bill could foundationally change Indigenous sovereignty in the nation. The bill is unlikely to pass. Despite that, many are angered about how the bill has reignited debate over the treaty, believing it has stirred up anti-Maori views and eroded the Maori-Crown relationship. This story is reported by Eva Corlett at The Guardian. CNN reports that, quote, more than 40 of Hong Kong's best-known pro-democracy figures have been sentenced to prison terms of up to 10 years on subversion charges in the biggest single blow to the city's already shrinking political freedoms following Beijing's sweeping crackdown on dissent. Among those handed sentences on Tuesdays was Joshua Wong, a former student leader and poster child of the city's once thriving pro-democracy movement, who shouted, "I love Hong Kong," before he left the dock. Reporters Chris Lau and Nectar Gan write, quote, Tuesday's mass sentencing illustrates how far that transformation has progressed, turning an outspoken city of 7.5 million, where protests were once common, into something resembling a mirror of the authoritarian Chinese mainland, with a who's who of opposition figures behind bars and other critical voices silenced or fled overseas, unquote. Finally, we have a news update that involves shoes, a kindergarten classroom, and a creature. Twice this month, a kindergarten class in Japan found a single shoe was stolen from the cubbyholes that store their indoor shoes. Police and staff were initially flummoxed when shoes started disappearing from the kindergarten in southwest Japan, not least because the, quote, thefts were of single shoes, not pairs. Police set up security cameras, noticing another single shoe went missing from the kindergarten that night. Sifting through camera footage, they saw a weasel appear from behind a wall, sidle up to the cubbyhole, and make off with a single white shoe in its mouth, all in the space of about 10 seconds. This story was reported by Justin McCurry in The Guardian, and now I really want to know what the weasels do with the shoes. Thank you for joining me to hear the news today. To subscribe, support the show, and listen in a choose-your-own section digest format, head over to groverreadsthenews.substack.com and click subscribe for $5 a month. If you like what you hear, please give the show 5 stars on your podcast app so it will rise to the top of others' feeds who are looking for a calm and connected way to keep up with the news. Thank you to those who have already shared, subscribed, and become a paid subscriber. Please note that I'll be taking a planned rest and there won't be a news update next week. I'll be back with you the first week of December to synthesize the news with you. As the news keeps unfolding, know that we don't have to face it alone. We can do it together. Be well.